meeting of the Planning Commission. This evening, there are no minutes to approve from the last meeting because it was only a week ago and they don't have them done yet. The report of the chair, I have nothing. Mike, do you have something? Nope. Okay. Director? Who's the director today?
I am. And there's
Okay.
nothing to report this evening.
Nothing to report this evening? Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we have our moment here where you can bring up topics or discussion. Anybody got anything they want to share, talk about?
I want to ask again about field trips.
Field trips, okay. I'll put that on the next pre-meeting agenda. Okay, then we'll jump right into the public hearings. So item number 1 is a conditional use for the renovation and expansion of the Rose Park Buddhist Temple at approximately 1185 West, 1000 North. Case number PLN PCM 2022-00911. Chrissy. That looks like a whole new screen up there.
Aubrey, I'm sorry. Do you know how to share the screen up there? Oh my gosh, that's fancy.
Okay, then you got to get really close to the microphone.
Okay. Okay. Good evening. So this is a conditional. Dang it. So there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
So this is a conditional use request for the expansion of a place of worship in the R1 7000 zone. Places of worship in single-family zones are conditional uses. This project went through a conditional use about 2 years ago, which you might remember, some of you are new, where they requested to do a second-story addition on the structure. They have come back this time and they decided to abandon those plans, and instead of doing a second story, they're requesting to expand the footprint and add an addition on the ground level instead of that second story. And the conditional use is required because of their expanding the footprint by more than 25% of the floor area. And staff is recommending approval of this request. So you can see the site plan on the page. The area located in the red is the proposed expansion on the ground floor. It is on the south west corner of the site. You can see that 12th West is on the west, and then 10th North is on the north. The site exceeds the required setbacks in the R1 7000 zone. It also exceeds the required parking. During staff's review, I found no detrimental impacts that don't any new detrimental impacts or detrimental impacts at all. The site is surrounded by the Rose Park Elementary School to the east and the south, and then across the street there is another place of worship, and then across the street to the west there are additional single-family homes. The proposal does match the height of the R1 7000 zone, so the height is 28 feet. So it should generally be in line with what you see across the street for those single-family homes and the capacity of the R1 7000 zone. Services are expected to remain as they currently are, with anywhere from 30 to 50 attendees on Sundays. So they are just expanding to primarily bring uses and community events inside that they currently hold outside, but they're not planning on new membership or expanding services that way. So here's some site photos. The addition is proposed in this area, like where the flag is, kind of filling in that corner there. And then I'm very quick today, but that concludes my presentation. So I'm recommending approval with no conditions on this one. And then the applicant is here as well.
Any questions for Chrissy? Does the applicant have a presentation or?
I think he has some comments. Do you want to come up?
Okay, come on up. You'll have 10 minutes and I need you to state your name clearly for the record into the microphone.
Sure. My name's Dan Murdoch from Silverado Construction, and I don't have a presentation. I just wanted to
Okay.
thank you for listening to this opportunity for us to do this expansion on the Buddhist temple. There are many individuals in the audience today who are looking forward to this renovation and seeing how it is working in that capacity at the moment. We shouldn't have any issues going forward with the renovation. It will actually improve the whole structure overall. So,
Okay, great. Any questions for the applicant?
So what is the use? What is the expansion going to be used for?
it's going to rearrange some of the worship space within the building. So right now they have a cafeteria, they have some worship space, they have some social gathering areas, and it's just going to change the orientation of those places.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Seeing no other questions, just hang right there and we'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone from the community council here? Seeing no one, is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the Planning Commission. Any questions, concerns, motions?
If no one has any comments, I'd be willing to make a motion. Based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission approve this application.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Andrew beat you. Okay, we have a motion by Mike and a second by Andra. Mike?
Yes.
Andreas?
I'll vote yes.
Levi isn't here. Okay, Brenda?
Yes.
Amy Burrows?
Yes.
Andra?
Yes.
Amy Berry?
Yes.
And Rick?
Yes.
That passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, including the chairman. You get your conditional use.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the second item on the agenda. This is a design review for the G3 apartments at approximately 634 South, 400 West. Case number PLN PCM 2022-00567. And we have Nan tonight.
Sorry, Chair. I saved it as a PDF, and normally it comes up as a PDF. And I am not used to Macs. Here we go. All right, thank you, Chair.
That's okay. Get up close to the microphone. Apparently the
This
minutes.
better?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been having a hard time hearing people.
Great. So we received a request for a design review to allow additional building height in the CG zoning district on the property located at 634 South, 400 West. The proposed redevelopment of the site would allow for a construction of a mixed-use structure that would house 184 residential units with retail and office space within the 7-story structure that fronts on 400 West. Presently, the site is an existing 1-story building with surface parking to the south and to the west that would need to be demolished to allow for this new construction. Staff has found that the proposed G3 apartment project meets the standards of the general commercial zoning district and applicable master plans and the design review criteria, and we are recommending that the Planning Commission approve the design review with the conditions listed in the report. The general commercial zoning district allows by right a 60-foot structure. Through a design review, an additional 30 feet are possible. The proposed additional 22 feet is being requested, so that there would be a total of 82 feet building height. This would allow for approximately 2 additional floors for a 7-story building. The G3 Apartments project meets the standards of design review by providing additional design elements beyond the standards of the CG district. The CG zoning district really doesn't have that many design standards. There's 2. The first is that there's at least 1 building entrance on the front of the building, and the second is that surface parking is lit. The additional design elements that the G3 apartment project would include is active ground floor spaces that would include retail, office, and a courtyard space. The building is oriented to the pedestrian through certain design elements and signage at a human scale, and facing to the public right-of-way. Numerous building entrances along the public street, increased fenestration on the ground floor and upper floors, interior parking set behind the active uses on the ground floor and on the second floor. There is a condition included in the report that somewhere on the site there'd be a visible, that art would be visible either to the public street or to privately held public spaces. There will also be a plaza that's visible and accessible from 400 West, and a mid-block walkway to improve the pedestrian network that's required by the downtown master plan. Staff has found that the G3 apartment project meets the goals and intent of the downtown master plan and Plan Salt Lake, and as it will allow for redevelopment of an underutilized site and increase the residential population downtown. This area also has the infrastructure proposed and existing that would facilitate this type of density. So the requested modifications, as stated earlier, the CG district allows by right 60 feet, and through this process they can ask for an additional, up to an additional 30 feet. They're asking for an additional 22 feet for a maximum height of 82 feet with 7 stories. And staff is recommending approval of the requested height, as it's been found that the intent of the design review standards have been met, and the proposed building height will be mitigated through some of the building elements that was discussed at the previous slide. So in order for the G3 apartment project to meet all of the design review criterion and the master plan goals, 3 conditions of approval are recommended by staff. The first relates to the type of lighting in the landscaping in order to meet our dark skies goals. Public easement is required so that the public can access the mid-block walkway. Seating dimensions that are required for privately held public spaces, which is also a standard of approval for the design review. And the last is that some form of artwork is included in the development that's visible from public spaces. So again, we're recommending, staff is recommending the Planning Commission approve the proposed design review as requested with the conditions listed in the staff report. And I'm available for any questions or comments that the commission may have. And the applicant is also here, and he does also have a presentation.
Okay. Any questions right now for Nan? Okay, would the applicant come forward? You'll have 10 minutes. Need you to be sure to introduce yourself into the microphone so it gets on the record.
Sure, sounds good.
You want to take this seat? You can take this seat if you want.
Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Good evening. I'm Newton Brighter. I represent Lake Union Partners in Seattle, Washington. Didn't get into a lot of.
You might need to get a little closer
better?
to the microphone. Yeah, it's.
I tend to mumble, so I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's-
Raise your hand if you want me to speak up. So yeah, again, Newton Brighter. So work with Lake Union Partners. We're based out of Seattle, Washington. Approximately 70% of our work is actually in buildings specifically like this, so 5/1 or 5/2 construction, mixed-use multifamily. These are some images of projects we've recently completed in Seattle, Washington, and some of the focus that we've reached and completed in the projects there has been focused on kind of design elements and partnering with local retailers to try to provide some sensitivity, but really amenity to local neighborhoods. I've been working actually personally on projects in Salt Lake for 7 years. We've completed 3 projects, 2 of them multifamily projects. The one on the right in that image is Meridian Apartments on North Temple. And the images of the townhomes on the left is a large-scale 220-unit townhome project in South Salt Lake. And then recently, we completed Granary Campus, which is located directly adjacent to this site in question to the south. So we really view this next project as an extension of this. Granary Campus is a 100,000 square foot grouping of 5 historic warehouses, kind of ranging from the late 1800s to about the 1950s. Now we proactively took it through a national landmarking process, so it's a national landmark. And now is kind of it comprises an outdoor industry-focused development. So is now a boutique hotel, Evo Hotel, Evo, an outdoor retailer, Level 9 Sports, which is a local Salt Lake retailer, and Salt Lake Bouldering Project. So our hope is to really kind of utilize that as an amenity to this next building and kind of extend the retail to the north. The architect we've partnered with is MVE Partners, and you're likely familiar with their group. We feel confident in their execution, but also just design aesthetic. I think the projects that they've been a part of in Salt Lake, we've really appealed to. Post House, Sugar Alley, and Dixon Apartments. And just briefly wanted to show some of the typical plans just for program to give a sense of that. In this view, the plan north is north on this. So just to the south of this is Granary Campus. Level 1 programming then is for parking, retail, and lobby. The second level, additional parking and residential. And the third level has amenities, pool, spa, and a typical residential floor. These are draft renderings where we're improving them, but they're always a good design tool. And you can see on the left the completed Granary Campus, that group of warehouses, and then G3 Apartments on the right. Start to get an impression of materials and execution. Here again, same general view, Granary Campus on the left, and then on the right, G3 Apartments with materials being weathered steel, black windows, and good quality connection with the street for the retail in the lobby. Yet another view, and you see what we're calling the second portion of the retail, which is a covered glass structure, which would be leased to a tenant. That level 3 amenity deck and stucco and black windows as well. Another image, and you get a better impression, I think, of the programmatic uses with the left side being an extension of that retail space, the center being a plaza as an amenity to the lobby to the right, the retail space, and also open to the public. And then a little bit of a zoomed in view of that area. Another shot looking north at the amenities and that central courtyard, and then the amenity deck for the apartments. So would open up to any questions that you might have, but yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to present and look forward to getting this under construction.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, it seems like a lovely project. I love the ground level retail. I'm just wondering when you're underwriting these. So I realize that current rents on studio 1 bedrooms are much higher per square foot than the 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. But when you do the underwriting, are you taking into account that we have 15,000 studio and 1 bedrooms coming online in the next year to year and a half?
We do. I mean, we see it. We work in Seattle, Portland, and now Salt Lake. In the underwriting, some of the challenges of 3-bedroom in particular is probably something you've seen consistently, that it's difficult to justify construction cost versus rent, frankly. It's just a pretty simple equation, but yeah, aware.
But I think that just taking the rents as static and not putting a dynamic model where you sort of take into account, supply of what is coming online from all the other developers in the city, it's not to me a reason that we should consider. It's just I'm concerned what the model is in the background.
Concerned that there's too many studio units being delivered.
It's your funeral. I don't know that it's worth for us considering, but it's just we have a lot, and I don't think we're gonna get $3 per square foot when we have $15,000 more, 15,000 units more. Anyway, it just seems like somewhere in the equations we should be there's this many under construction. They will be done at this date.
Sure. No. So general pipeline, we do take that into account. I think we justify that as also our responsibility, not to ourselves, but on behalf of the partnership, banks, et cetera, that fund them. I think what we focus on something like this programmatically is, yes, rent is a consideration, but also location and understanding the demographic that would choose to live in the Greenery District over somewhere like Sugar House or downtown. So some of that is sensitizing it to what we feel like is the most marketable for that location.
So this microphone is way. I have a question on how you're treating the mid-block walkway. Do you have any renderings or narrative on how that's going to be treated and integrated into this?
I can give you some narrative. I don't have a rendering of it. So this is probably the best image for that. What's not indicated here, because it obviously wasn't the intent of this presentation, but the parking garage that you see grayed out in the background, that's Industries parking garage, which is, I think, somewhere around 1,000 parking stalls. I'm not certain. Their mid-block walkway is just to the north, to the right of that parking garage. So our project then on the north side of our building effectively lines up with that. So the intent, at least in the location of it, is that it connects directly with the mid-block walkway of the parking garage. So it's the most consistent and straight connection to 400 West. In terms of treatment, I think what we take into account is design, pedestrian safety, and also that we want it to be generally seen as an opportunity and an amenity to the building. So what we've worked with Nan so far on and will continue to do is lighting, so both just general building lighting, catenary lighting, and other things to make sure that, I think, quality of lighting but also safety is considered. The other is that in almost all of our projects, artwork has been a very consistent theme and a common thread. So I'd point to, so Greenery Campus, you can see on the right, there's a large-scale mural. We worked with 50 individual artists, all local to Salt Lake, for each one of the hotel rooms, and then murals and artwork throughout the project. So this we would see is no different than that execution. So we'd love to look at murals and sculpture on that mid-block walkway to make sure that it ends up being an amenity to the neighborhood.
Do we have a north elevation rendering? I saw a south and an east.
It is in the staff report. I don't know off the top of my head the page.
Just the south and the east are ones that are at the beginning, and there's no other elevation.
It's an attachment in the staff report.
So I'm sorry. So we still looking for a north elevation?
I am.
Okay.
Because I mean, I think, Nan, that this is where, your oversight that we would delegate to you, but then how is this north elevation side of the building, is this walkway going to be an amenity, or is it just kind of like, hey, we're putting a sidewalk here? Because that's something that we would want to pay attention to beyond lighting.
There's kind of an image of it on page 30. I don't know if that's real page 30.
Commissioner
Page
Barry,
29.
there's a north elevation on page 27, the staff report. It's just,
There we go. Okay.
Yep.
See, so I'm concerned. Then this elevation, this north elevation, at least on this page, all along the pedestrian line, it's just like a big gray wall.
Can I address that actually? Absolutely. And so that's an earlier, that's from our intake packet from June on that, and happy to work with Nan and otherwise, but we see that as really a canvas. So would look to paint large murals, have sculpture, lighting, other details attached to that.
So does this meet the requirements of how many feet per openings, et cetera? Because it looks like just the whole, basically that side of the building is a solid wall.
So right now in the downtown master plan requires this mid-block walkway to connect to 400 West from the site to the west. Otherwise, we're currently working on additional standards for the mid-block walkway. We don't have set standards for the mid-block walkway. That doesn't mean that you can't include conditions in order to improve the mid-block walkway.
Don't we have set standards though for the building length and like how many feet between openings, or so that it's not one big solid wall?
Yes, we do, but that's along public right-of-ways. So this will be a privately held
Okay.
public space is how we'd
Okay.
consider this.
Yeah, I think as we go through and I think about this more, that's something that I'd pay a little bit of attention to. I don't know that I'll have like a set of conditions, but having this be like just a big solid wall isn't inviting, and it also isn't lending itself to safety. So,
Both, yeah, and I take those concerns seriously as well, and so I don't
Okay.
differ. The challenge to some degree is that it is mid-block, the site is, so you don't have a street frontage, so placing some sort of retail or glazing element doesn't necessarily, you can't really have an operable business there.
yeah, it doesn't have to be a business. I think it can.
So I think. in
There's a
terms
lot of design that you can do that can make this inviting and have some interaction to the pedestrian, and it doesn't have to be a retail space. We've seen some pretty interesting design stuff on these types of things, so I know you can do it beyond a blank wall. Right, go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with Amy that I think we have a 300 and some foot long, or not, maybe 300, maybe 250 foot long thing that backs up to that's basically a parking garage on the other side and starts with a loading dock, so it's not really a very attractive mid-block walkway. So I'm assuming that at some point in time, the property to the north is going to be redeveloped. And so at that point, I think we need to, and this is more for the planning staff than for you, is to make sure that that mid-block walkway then can get widened and made more human by that redevelopment. It's a 10-foot, it's only 10 feet wide. There's no possibility of vegetation because there's no light that's going to get it to it from a 7-story building. And so I think it's really, it's at this point in time, it's kind of a dangerous little alleyway. And I imagine that keeping it closed off is the only option at this point. So I wouldn't even call it a mid-block walkway. It's not, it doesn't even, so if there's something we are, if this is being done so that it's not though, is it? It's not part of the conditional use that they require a mid-block walkway, right?
Improvements to the mid-block walkway weren't included in the conditions that staff is recommending, but that's not to say that the commission can't include conditions, specific conditions to improve the mid-block walkway.
Okay.
Right now, we are working on standards
Okay.
for these mid-block walkways. Right now, there aren't any standards.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, on the first floor, it shows a breezeway. Can you talk about the breezeway and also talk about what that is? Because it just sort of
This
doesn't
right
make
here.
any sense. And also, I mean, I can't tell you where it's going. What is
Right here?
that?
Actually, so if you look at this first, well, actually, maybe just to follow up on the mid-block walkway, understood, and I do take the comment seriously. The condition shown in our June packet was kind of before a lot of detail was out of the building. I think lighting, artwork, other improvements, absolutely open to and intend to complete. So I take it seriously and have no intention of creating a dangerous, uncomfortable area, so.
Excuse me, Commissioner Chair, can I just add on to the mid-block walkway conversation, just in case it wasn't clear? There is a mid-block walkway shown on the master plan in this area, so there is one required, but we don't have specific standards for them, but there is a walkway in this area
So is
required.
10, we approve of, so we can say that a 10-foot wide walkway that has a 7-story building next to it is okay?
I think right now the standards in some of our other zones, not necessarily the CG zone, but require that walkway to be 10 feet. So that is the standard that we've applied to these, but we don't have specific requirements for anything beyond that right now.
Okay, thank you very much. So now can we talk about the
Sure.
breezeway and what that is? Is that the lobby? I mean, if
Yeah,
it's not the
no,
lobby,
absolutely.
what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is, so this is the area you're referring to?
Yes.
Zone level 2 and level 3. The program, if you can see my cursor, this is the lobby, and then this is the retail space. We have in the retail space provisions for food and beverage, hood, et cetera. So again, intended to be an extension of the hotel and the other sort of anchor of retail and commercial in that area. That's intended to be, I guess, labeled as a breezeway is inaccurate. It's a plaza. And this is a better representation here as well. So the depth is, call it 50 or 60 feet. And both the lobby and the retail space have operable windows that operate onto it. So the intent is that you would have food and beverage in the retail space on the left. That would activate, you would have pedestrian or tenants, residential tenants on the right side, and then that would be an interactive space. And then likewise, it would be open to the public from 400 West.
Okay, and is there space between this building and the building to the south?
There is. It's approximately 6 to 8 feet. It varies depending on location, and the intent is that would be primarily just for service.
Okay, and tell me about the wave pool.
So the wave pool is a potential tenant. So we've looked at different options. I think at this point, the glass structure in the courtyard, we're calling that an extension of the retail space, and so that could be food and beverage, food hall, something along those lines. At this stage and early in the renderings, we're playing with the option of the one potential tenant being a standing surf wave. That I'd call it a 25% chance or something like that, and that would be a tenant improvement at this point. So the approval requested is really just as retail space.
So you're showing this as a sort of green space or green, it's in green. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
But it's not a green space. It's basically a tenant space.
Correct.
It's a retail space essentially.
Yes.
And it could be almost anything, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we do have for this portion though a glazed covering to really support high quality retail of some indication there.
And that would be accessed only through the front retail space.
Correct.
So really, in essence, it's all one big red T-shaped thing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions? Okay, hang tough right there. We'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for further questions or a motion.
Okay, so I would like to get some ideas of how you would treat that north elevation, so that I don't go crazy and make a condition that you really hate?
Yeah. So, actually, this is probably a. So, lighting wise, this is as close as I'm going to get for a rendering to show you, but catenary lighting throughout. So, if you look at that image of kind of bistro lighting throughout the whole course of it. And I think that would be primarily for light quality. On top of that, we have a lighting designer on the project, so we've already started looking at this. Any kind of pedestrian safety lighting just to make sure that the actual walkway itself is well lit and safe. And then in terms of that wall, again, I proposed it, looked at it as a canvas. So we'd intend to hire a local artist or several to install murals or different artwork on that wall.
So are there any opportunities for some openings to the wall that I don't know what's really behind it, but so that it's not just a solid structure? Because even if it's a mural, when you're walking and you have that narrow of a space, it's not very wide, walking next to a solid wall with nobody's is not inviting, and it actually doesn't feel very safe. So whether it's painted or not becomes irrelevant at that point.
I think there are opportunities. Part of it is that some of that is structure to the building, just inherent to the concrete structure. So some of that is actual shear walls.
So they don't have to be openings in which you physically can go into the space, but that, an opening for a window or to break it up, so that it's not this solid wall, because it's a pretty narrow walkway.
Understood. Yes, I think there are opportunities. I don't know to what extent. Primarily only because, so call it this portion right here, is, I believe, a concrete shear wall that holds the structure up, so I don't think you can actually navigate that. Other areas are infill, so I think that there'd be opportunity to dedicate openings, and absolutely open to that, for sure. Understood. And so, again, I take your concerns seriously and appreciate them.
So, but above that, where you were just pointing, 2 floors up is a little plaza, is that right?
Above that, these are private.
Yeah, I understand, but still, it's an open space, even though it's private. So it isn't, what I just said was it's a 7-story building with it's not, because there's a setback 2 floors up that has the potential of at least putting some eyes down into there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So this is all glazing and all units facing that walkway. And I think what we took as the most important piece was to connect directly with the walkway north of, I think it's a 9-story parking garage, so maybe even a worse condition on the industry parking garage, and making the most direct connection for pedestrians. The other then working again to improve, I think, pedestrian scale with lighting scale, and then correct, this is all private patios for the units above.
Anyone else? Someone concoct a motion?
I will endeavor to concoct a motion. Okay. Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the Commission approve this application with the conditions listed in the staff report, with the following modification. 1, that defer to staff's approval, work to improve the pedestrian safety and interaction along the walkway by considering lighting, murals, but also openings along that north elevation wall.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Amy Berry and a second by Mike. Rick?
Yes.
Amy Berry?
Yes.
Andra?
Yes.
Amy Burrows?
Yes.
Brenda Shearer?
Yes.
Andreas?
I'll vote yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And the chair will also vote yes. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8-0. Unanimous.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
all for your commentary, and I appreciate it and take that with respect.
Okay, we'll move on to the third item on our agenda. Design review and plan development for Spark at approximately 1500 West North Temple. Case number PLN PCM 2022-00708 and case number PLN PCM 2022-00709. And we have Aaron.
Good evening, Commissioners. Let me just get this situated. And I have the applicants here with me today. So yeah, this is a request for plan development and design review approval for a project known as the Spark development. And my goal today is to go over the pertinent details of the project, including the current context, the requested modifications, and the anticipated benefits from the project. So just a brief overview, it is a mixed-use development with 200 affordable units. Half of those will be...
Madam Chair, can you have Aaron speak up?
Am I not close enough to the microphone?
Yeah, there you got to be that close. Okay.
All right. So half of those affordable units will be for 60 to 70% AMI, and the other half will be 20 to 60% AMI. I have a chart breaking that down later in this presentation that we can go look at. It is in the TSA MUEC C zoning district. It's a lot of letters, just means the mixed use employment center at the core of a transit station. They are asking for modifications to design review for multiple items and 2 items through plan development, including the facade height at North Temple and the height of the fence, additional height for a fence to screen some utilities. So let's just go through some of the project's context. Here's the project site located at Power Station. When the master plan was adopted, it was called Cornell Station, but it is in fact Power Station, served by the Green Line tracks. It is bound on 3 sides by public roads, and that has created some design challenges for the applicant, especially when we talk about this mid-block walkway that was also incorporated into the project. Here's some photos of what's going on currently on the site. You can see there's a fence there. In the past, there were complaints about encampments, so that's why the fence is there now. So this is the existing sign looking west on North Temple. Title tells you what's happening. This is looking at the track station and the crosswalk. This is 1460 West looking up and down that sidewalk. Here's the back of the property where the mid-block walkway will be located. Here's the track station from across the street and the project site. So the requested modifications, we'll go through the design review first, the plan development, and then we can look at some elevations to visualize them. So through the design review process, they're asking for a reduction in the minimum front yard setback in the TSA district, and that is on all sides of all street-facing sides of the building. Also, they're asking for modification to the required amount of ground floor uses on the street-facing facades, the ground floor glass on the street-facing facades, the number of building entrances on street-facing facades, and the number and the blank wall space on street-facing facades. They're also asking for a modification or allowance for buildings longer than 200 feet. And then plan development, we talked about this before, but the minimum building height of the building facing North Temple and the maximum fence height in a front yard for a utility area. And here's a mock-up of what the proposed utility area will look like with the fence, kind of cute. Okay, so we'll go through some of what exactly is happening here. So here's the front facade or the south elevation, and there are 2 masses on either side of this building, and along the center where there's a kind of a U shape. This section of the building is shorter than 25 feet, which requires plan development approval to be shorter than that minimum height. Staff feels it's an appropriate ask given the design of the building and what will be located there will be active commercial uses. There's also here on the east elevation facing 1460 west, that is where the parking access will be. So there is a reduction in the number of active uses along that facade. However, that stretch sort of acts as the back of the building, since there is a mid-block walkway kind of taking up the actual back of the structure. So this is where vehicular access will be, where trash access, all other that type of stuff will be accessed from this side. On the west side is the proposed daycare, and they're asking for these modifications to accommodate the safety of this proposed daycare, kind of limiting the number of entrances, and also to accommodate the play area located near the rear of the property here. And now it is an active use, but it doesn't qualify as a ground floor use through our code. There's also the setbacks. On this diagram here, the red is the 5-foot setback, and you can see not all of the building meets that 5-foot setback, and the requirement is at least 50% of the front of the building needs to be within 5 feet of the property line. So, but based on the design of the building, the needs for the daycare, the additional space so that cars pulling in and out of the parking area have more space to be able to see, to accommodate the site triangle, staff feels like this ask is an acceptable ask. All right, we can go through some of these benefits. So here's a breakdown of the affordable housing required by the RDA agreement. You can see 70 to 80% AMI. I was off by just a little bit. And then 20 and 30% will be a part of those units. And then there's a section that's 40 to 60. One area that, staff feels is especially important is this mid-block walkway to kind of build connectivity in this neighborhood. Cornell Street and 1460 West are very long, and to go around those blocks it's a long walk. And it will eventually connect with the anticipated trail along the canal here. And you can see that connection was identified in the plan, and it's shown here in their plans. Yes, and then there's street activation at the light rail station. This is something that the plan calls for, is kind of to use their word, a spark at the site for commercial uses, active uses at the core of a transit station. And then the proposed daycare is also a project benefit that staff anticipates from this project. And so the recommendation, staff does recommend approval with the condition listed in the staff report because it meets the design review standards, it meets plan development standards, it meets the zoning standards with those modifications, and it complies with and fulfills master plan policies. So that recommended condition is to delegate final approval to staff for the privately owned public spaces, the lighting, and the streetscape improvements, in addition to all the other zoning standards that were not modified. And that's the end, and happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Aaron right now?
Yeah, Aaron. So do we have standards for walkways in this zone?
No, the only standards that are adopted are in the downtown. I think even just the D2.
What's the width of this walkway?
So it is a 10-foot wide walkway, but there are additional amenities happening here with the trees, and the applicant can speak more about what's some of the activation stuff they have planned.
So I have a question on this fence. I remember reading that the additional height fence was for the daycare playground, but now it's going to be for utility screening?
Yeah, they were initially wanting to do that for the daycare, but we did not get a design, and so they pulled back on that, but in the report, it's really, the ask is only for the utility area.
Oh, because it was written that it was for the playground.
Oh, it is
But-
in there?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, shoot. Well,
That's all right.
my
but,
mistake.
So then where is this fencing going to be for the utilities?
A lot of these plans are showing transformers over here, and that's outdated.
On the
but-
1460 west side?
Yeah, but they're actually going to be over here on Cornell, behind the play area, adjacent to the walkway.
Okay. So, all right. I wanted to now understand where that was going to
Yeah,
be.
some of the older plans are going to show it here. I apologize for that, but the official spot is here.
Okay. And it's just for the screening, the playground is
Yeah, going to be 4
fine
feet.
how it's going to be under the
Yeah.
code. Okay. That's all I have for right now.
So I'm confused about where the daycare outdoor area is. Is
Okay.
that space just south of the transformer?
Yes, that's correct. So the daycare, drop-off area, play area, and then transformer location.
Okay, that's great. And then the mid-block crossing, you said that the sidewalk is 10 feet wide. The crossing itself is more like 45
Yes.
or 45 feet, looks like in the scale of the drawing. So it's a pretty wide,
Correct.
it's like a park.
Yeah, it's a small
essentially.
park. Yeah.
It's a mid-block park.
Mhm.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure of that. Are we requiring the retail in the front, all across the front? Is that one-story building, is that something we're requiring? Or is
That's
that something that the applicant is really, really wanting? Because, you know, it might look really a lot better if that were actually like not there, and there would be the courtyard park / opening onto the street.
You're saying removing that commercial space and opening straight into the courtyard
Yes.
within there.
Yeah, having that as an open space on the street.
You can discuss that with the applicant,
Okay.
but as proposed,
Because, you know, it's not, you know, the way things are going right now, I'm not sure that this is going to be a great retail space for quite a long time. Maybe it's phase 2.
gotcha.
I had one follow-up, Aaron. So
Uh-huh.
one of the other conditions that we have here is a blank wall exceeding 200 feet. Is that on the 1460 west?
There are blank walls on both the Cornell Street and the 1460 West facades. They are, you'll see here, there is a blank wall between the glass and this door here. There's a blank wall further back. And same thing over here. They've got significant blank wall. Technically is a blank wall there, even though it is behind that more active playground use. But that
maximum is 21 feet.
the
Okay,
maximum.
maybe the applicant can talk more about how that's going to be treated.
Say that again. How it's going to be
So
treated?
maybe the applicant can talk more about how that's going to be treated. So-
Correct. And
Okay.
staff did ask for changes to the plan to meet that, but this is the ask that they brought before today.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Aaron? Okay, we'll let the applicant have his time. You get 10 minutes. Be sure to state your name for the record and get close to the microphone.
I can trade you seats so you can have control.
Hi, good evening. My name is Keith McCloskey with KTGY. We're an architectural firm that's been working with Brinshaw Development on this project since 2018. It was a City of Salt Lake City RDA RFP, and it's kind of started and stopped a few times based on funding, but it's back now and it's going into plan check. And currently, you know, we're trying to deliver something very close to what the original intent of the design vision in that RFP was. I think the main difference being that it's a 6-story building now versus 7. The original design for the massing always had kind of some terracing of roof forms down to kind of the public realm. And so we've got a series of kind of on-grade plazas, the southeast corner being kind of like the entrance plaza off of the platform. People crossing the street would arrive at that corner. At the southeast corner here, from that plaza, there's some of the utility equipment that's existing that we can't relocate, that's in the right-of-way. There's, I think, a controller for the traffic light, for some other electrical utilities. And so there will be a small fence and some planting there to kind of screen that, but the plaza kind of flows around that. And that becomes the entrance into the public resident lobby where, you know, somebody coming for as a first-time visitor or potential renter would go to the leasing lobby. And then the remainder of that frontage is the single-story retail. And, you know, the vision for the project was always to have affordable housing, to have a commercial component, and to have a daycare component. You know, this project's been envisioned as workforce housing, and a lot of folks would be commuting potentially to downtown via the mass transit, and having an opportunity to have the daycare on site was really important. And the commercial component was the one that we thought would kind of tie everything together. Residents living out here off the tracks line that would have, you know, access to downtown wouldn't necessarily have to move too far if there were some local services and other commercial amenities on site. So the vision for that, albeit small commercial component, which is a little over 5,000 square feet of that linear single-story building, was to always have something that was engaging from the public realm experience, but also creating essentially a three-dimensional fence to the resident courtyard. So the purpose of having kind of the different courtyards is not only to kind of create maybe some different curated spaces with different programs, but also to create what we consider kind of like a quasi-public space. We imagine it's a place where people that are attending things in the commercial space, or that are visitors to, say, a coffee shop that might rent that space, would be able to flow into that on-grade courtyard. Residents would have access to that courtyard. That's kind of where everybody would mix and mingle. But we also have areas up on the second floor above the podium where they have truly private resident-only spaces. And then moving through the building, there's some various roof deck opportunities as well. So the project was always envisioned to have a number of kind of terraced open spaces, different experience, different views that could happen at each of these. And so the building form was kind of a result of trying to create all of these open spaces. You know, it's pretty typical. A lot of projects we work on have garages that occupy, you know, the balance of that ground floor kind of behind the liner program of lobby, back of house, commercial spaces, and other supporting spaces. But in this case, we really did try and be thoughtful about how much parking the project would have, and keep it compact to the point where there was on-grade open space. And so, you know, in the months when the weather's nice, I mean, we imagine these roll-up doors on the front of this commercial being up in the front, up in the back. People could kind of move freely through. It's essentially a public space on grade, but at night it can be locked down. So I don't necessarily disagree with maybe some benefits of that being more open, but I think from the owner's standpoint, they like the idea of security and protection for the residents, you know, in the evenings, and being able to have the ability to shut that down. So we see it as something that's somewhat flexible. It could be opened up, could be shut down, depending on the type of tenant, the type of weather at that time of year. But essentially, you know, everything above the second floor is all residential program. As it was mentioned earlier, on the ground floor, we do have the daycare that's at the southwest corner. And, you know, that was really a challenge in terms of finding good outdoor space, and, you know, the courtyard was sometimes considered, and I think just the intermingling of the commercial users with the residential users of the courtyard and the daycare was a little complex and maybe too much to pack into that ground floor courtyard. And so that's why it does end up on the outside, on kind of the northwest corner, just north of the interior daycare. The idea is that that space would be accessed through the secure fence on the north side of that space, and it would essentially become kind of a liner program. Our hope is to further develop once we have the operator nailed down and we know who's going to be in there, what that fence is. I'm sure there's going to be some type of signage element on that, and there may be a request for more height in the future in terms of what that operator feels is the adequate, safe height for the fence that they'd like to do there. For the purpose of this meeting, I think it's just TBD. We're going to keep it per code maximums for now and see if it needs to increase. We would come back later. But that's essentially the kind of background or the story behind the project, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, so I would like to better understand both of those side streets that are these blank walls. I understand more of the Cornell Street for the daycare, but to have less openings. But I think that the 1460 West Street, like, how do you have plans to break up the length of that in some way?
On the ground floor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so our lobby runs back to where you see the glass stopping about 60 feet back. And then I think where that 21-foot blank wall is, that's where our stairwell that's coming down from the roof down to the street level comes down. We've got, I believe, concrete shear there, and then we have the opening to the street. And so that's one location where we exceed the 15 feet by about 6 feet. And then beyond that, we have some other programs like the package room, some trash rooms and other service programs before you get to the garage gate. And we have a few man doors and entrances into that garage area through the middle. As you get back towards the back end of the site, towards the northeast corner, there will be, some larger openings that'll be, I think, 6 to 7 feet apart, where we'll have some solid shear walls there as well, but albeit smaller. So we're trying to make sure that the entire frontage has activation with pedestrian entrances where it makes sense. There's some sections that are strictly garage where the walls do exceed by a few feet, but adding an extra door either wasn't feasible with the current structure or just didn't seem to make sense based on the program behind that part of the building.
So I think sometimes breaking up the walls doesn't always mean an entrance, right? There's plenty of other design types of elements you can incorporate that aren't entrances, but then still visually break it up.
Like plane changes and material changes, color changes.
Right. So are those things that you would consider?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I don't think they're, anything that's going to break the bank, but it is feasible to do that without entrances every so many feet.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
Yeah, no, we'd be open to that.
Anyone else? Question for the applicant right now? Okay, hang tight. We'll open the public hearing on this matter. Is there anyone from the community council that wishes to speak? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for any further discussion and a motion.
The more I look at this, the more that little bar, that short bar building in the very front really bothers me, because it gives the impression that we don't have a tall building here. That we've got two tall buildings and a short building in between, instead of a whole complex that's got a large sense. I'm wondering, this is just sort of and also and I think that's exactly the impression we don't want to have on North Temple, that we've just sort of put two tall buildings between an existing strip mall, I'm wondering if we can think about pushing that entire mass, not, you know, back toward the parking garage with, and having retail, but having it open up to the courtyard that comes onto the street. And the courtyard then would be a quasi-public space where when you open up the doors to your retail, you have the potential to have, you know, a party. You can, you know, you really have and especially right across the street from it does mean that there isn't, and of course the client would have to weigh in on this, but it does mean that there isn't that private public space, but it's also a better public space in the sense that it's more open to the street. People can see it. It's a safer public street from that reason alone too. And so, and also then you would have the impression of this as this big building surrounded by, you know, with a retail pushback and a plaza in the front. So I'm hoping that is something that can be considered, because from the very moment I saw this, I saw that, you know, that just does not work for me. And I think it actually is part of, that's one of the reasons why we don't want these short buildings on North Temple.
I don't know. We could let the applicant reply too, but my instinct would be that might reduce foot traffic to the businesses, and if we're already struggling with retail, I don't know. The applicant surely has a better view of this, but my concern would be that that's not going to drive foot traffic if they have to go another 50 or 100 feet.
Yeah, you know, when you've been working on something for a few years, sometimes you get so used to that concept as the concept that, you know, I hadn't thought about that, to be honest. I mean, I'm picturing the scenario where that program, say, lines the garage and you leave the balance of the courtyard forward. I do.
But it's on the street where it has some potential to activate the street as a place where people can sit and, you know, and so forth.
Yeah, you know, we have some non-residential space, but on, you know, some projects that are inset like that are off the street, that are not right on the public sidewalk. Typically when we're doing that, it's not true commercial, it's more like live workspaces, so that it's accessible to the public, but it doesn't function as true commercial. We've seen that succeed, but normally there's, like, say, anchor retail in the corners, and then, you know, as you get deeper into the plaza space, you've got the live work there to kind of continue that. And we do that often where there's just not the demand for that much retail. A lot of, you know, cities are pushing to grow it, and then they realize, well, maybe we can't make that much retail work, but we like the feel of it, we like the activation, the pedestrian direct connection to the doors, and so kind of doing some commercial, some live work, and kind of rounding that out is something that we've done. I feel like in this case, I know that the owner's preference was to try and create that privatized space, that they had the flexibility of opening it up and kind of making it more permeable. And I think there were, you know, 5 of these garage bays that would line up with each other on the street side and on the back side, and that depending on the final format of that tenant, you know, if it's a more singular tenant or a food hall or something like that that has a couple, you know, small kiosks in it, but is generally open seating, that I feel like could be a great public space, and I think that it could work, you know, pulled forward. So in terms of the height, I mean, you know, we did look at the massing for a compliant scenario, and I think proportionally it didn't quite feel right. It felt like it was more competing with the other volumes, and that having more contrast between the 2 taller ones and one shorter one that was clearly the street wall that engaged and interacted with the pedestrians. We felt that the single story made sense in terms of that height. And, you know, we're imagining this rooftop being active too. We're going to have kind of an intensive eco roof, basically, that's going to be vegetated, that would have opportunity for potentially kind of an edible garden, things like that. You know, originally the vision was always that the businesses that were operating out of the ground floor, whether it was a restaurant, farm to table kind of environment, like, could actually use that rooftop as their direct connection. Now it's kind of evolved into a resident opportunity, but it's still an open space, and we still imagine that the residents that kind of spill out onto this space are going to be able to use this and basically look down over street traffic and, you know, what's happening out kind of in the public realm. So, I mean, I kind of feel like pulling it forward to the street helps it engage a little bit better with the public realm, but that's my opinion in terms of kind of how to create both an urban street edge, but also allow for an internal space that, whether it's beer garden tables, you know, under lighting or something, that could be a semi-private space that could be shut down and used for events or something that isn't just kind of open right to the back of the walk.
Our residents are pretty lazy. If they have to walk an extra 50 or 100 feet, I mean, I think that might be a deal breaker.
I don't think that's an issue. It really is. We're talking about creating public plaza where people would be on a regular basis, and they would be, you know, in some landscaping and so forth. I mean, they have to walk the extra 50 or 100 feet to get to the beer garden too. So, you know,
But I was just going to add that to your question later about could it be phased, that's something that I think could be up for discussion, because I think that as we get closer to building this out, and you know, if that's going to be the last thing to be built and there doesn't appear at the time to be the demand for it, and the city doesn't feel like it's a absolute requirement, the RDA doesn't feel like it's integral to the project, you know, that I think originally as part of the RFP, that was part of the program, was for the diversity of the uses. And I think that, you know, now if there's no demand for retail and it's just not going to survive there, you know, the developer is severely cost pinched on this project. And if they saw any opportunity to reduce hard cost, we did reduce the floor to floors, and we kind of pancaked the building a little bit to shave square footage in some areas. But I don't think they would object to kind of phasing that as the final piece, and if there's no demand for the commercial, leaving it as an open public plaza, potentially.
And that would require a modification, as it's proposed. Other than the height, it's meeting the setbacks and the ground floor uses.
Courtyard. This is a courtyard. It's not on the street anymore. So,
No, Aaron's correct. It would require another modification to the setbacks.
Correct.
Since there would be, the building would be eliminated in that center, and it would be the plaza now. You would have to modify that requirement.
I see so many positive externalities from ground floor retail, and I realize that it is a struggle, and now we're not actually, you know, the usual conversation we have is forcing developers to put it in, and we have somebody who's going to put it in, and I hear what you're saying. There might not be demand now, but people get into habits if they move into communities without ground floor retail, and they're in the habit of driving more and in the habit of ordering from Amazon and creating more traffic on our streets. And I love ground floor retail, and it's so hard. I'm very sympathetic to developers that it's expensive, but I really would I understand public spaces are also really valuable, but I think we also could get some, is there a way of putting a walkway into the private courtyard so that people have access to that, but they have to go through the retail, which might help the coffee shop? We've seen the Illy coffee shop
More like
a lot,
breezeway.
by the way. Yeah.
Anyone else? Thoughts? Maybe a motion?
I'm willing to try and make a motion.
Okay.
Okay. Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the Commission approve the following applications for a plan development and a design review with the conditions listed in the staff report, with the additional condition that delegate to staff to work with the applicant to address the 200-foot blank walls.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Amy Berry and a second by Mike. Andra,
Yes.
Amy Burrows,
Yes.
Brenda.
No.
Okay. Andreas,
I'll vote yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Amy Berry,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
and the chair will vote yes. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 1. The motion passes. Thank you. Good luck.
You.
Okay, we'll move on to item 4, our zoning map amendment at approximately 130 North, 2100 West. Case number PLN PCM 2022-00833. And we get Chrissy back.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to hold off?
Well, we seem to be having a cookie moment here.
That is important.
Just make sure your microphone's turned off when you're eating cookies. Okay.
Okay. So this is a request to amend.
Is the microphone on?
Yes. There we go.
There you go.
Oh, man.
They're sensitive, yeah.
This is a request to amend the zoning map to remove the property at 130 North, 2100 West from the Airport Flight Path Protection Influence Zone B. The property is currently occupied by a commercial building, and staff is recommending that the commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council with the condition listed in your staff report. And then just to point out these maps on your screen, so the property is located in the TSA MUEC zone. And then it's in that airport overlay zone B. It's on the edge of the zone, but then south of the property there is an additional restaurant. But then zone A is located to the south. Our map is wrong. Our geocortex is what it's called that loads our zoning layers is wrong. So it shows that zone B crosses the freeway to the east, but the boundary is actually at the freeway, and across the freeway is the lower, less restrictive zone C. So as far as development potential, the request to remove the property from the overlay would allow the applicant to use the property as transitional housing for those experiencing homelessness. So city code right now doesn't have a perfect category for this type of use. Rooms that are available for rental periods or lease periods less than 30 days are typically considered hotels or motels, and then greater than 30 days is falls into a residential category. So as far as the impact of this rezone request, the biggest impact is that it would allow residential uses. The Airport Influence Zone B is less restrictive than Zone A, and essentially allows the full list of land uses in the TSA zone, but multifamily housing, because the TSA zone doesn't allow for single-family housing anyway. So that's, just to be clear, that's the biggest change, is that it would just allow multifamily housing, this zoning map amendment. And as mentioned in your staff report, Zone B does include similar uses such as rest homes. They are allowed in Zone B, it's just that multifamily housing that's not allowed. So as far as master plan compatibility, staff reviewed the North Temple Boulevard master plan, and this property is located in the transition area of that master plan, which is the star on the screen, and found that it's generally not in conflict with the master plan. The plan acknowledges that the area is going to change and calls for densifying the area to support the success of the track station and then the future track station called for in the plan. The plan does mention, though, that it should be compatible with the Airport Influence Zone, which this request is asking to modify. And then it also mentions that the streetscape amenities should be improved along North Temple to support additional housing in the area. However, during my review of the plan, I did find that it is generally in support of this request. I also reviewed Plan Salt Lake and found that the request meets the principles and initiatives of Plan Salt Lake, primarily to support homeless services and affordable housing. And then it also meets the growing SLC, which is our 5-year housing plan. And then additionally, the Thriving in Place study, when the consultant provided information on that a few months ago with data, they found that the city is severely lacking deeply affordable housing. And so that was also reviewed during my analysis. So 4 key considerations. Staff was initially concerned with this request when it came in and brought that to the applicant that, we generally don't support concentrating and allowing housing for low-income individuals where we wouldn't normally approve market rate housing. I brought that to the applicant, and they responded with what they called a noise study that they had done on the property that showed that impacts from the airport are not as severe as we thought. impacts from the noise generated by the airport aren't as severe as initially anticipated, and that actually the noise concerns are primarily from the freeway, which probably isn't a huge surprise, but the biggest ticks on their study were from truck traffic on the freeway. And when looking at that, we do allow market rate housing on the east side of the freeway, so that essentially has the exact same impact as this property, and that is allowed by right on the opposite side of the freeway. I also looked into transit access to make sure that this is within walkability to transit. It's within a quarter mile of tracks and then very close to several bus stops. And then just looking at the surrounding properties, it's not incompatible with the neighboring properties, and I didn't find any negative impacts associated with the request. The neighboring properties are primarily hotels as well, which is the current use of the site. And then the suggested condition of approval, this was also reviewed by the Director of Airport Planning, and he found no concerns with the request besides that we would need to have a condition of approval that makes sure that sound attenuation is still required on the property, which would be required if the airport overlay was not changed. So for site photos, you can see the building right here that's proposed to be remodeled. Then south of the site, there is a Mexican restaurant, which I actually don't know if it's currently in use still. When I went on my site visit, it looked like it might be empty. And then this photo on the bottom left shows that the site is set below the freeway. It's slightly below the freeway, so hopefully that mitigates some of those impacts from noise and visual. And then during my review, I reviewed the standards and compliance for zoning map amendments and found that this proposal furthers the purpose of the zoning ordinance. It will not negatively impact neighboring properties. It furthers the city's goals of affordable housing, and overall it's supported by city plans and policies. So with that, I'm recommending approval, recommending that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council with the suggesting condition on a development agreement for sound attenuation. And that concludes my presentation. The applicant is here and they also have a presentation. I'm happy to answer questions at this time too.
Okay. Any questions for Chrissy right this minute?
Yeah. What exactly would the development agreement cover?
Mm-hmm. So the development agreement would say that any new development or remodels on the property must have sound attenuation, and I don't quite understand how that works, but I think it's just extra building code requirements that lessen the impact of the noise from the airport.
Okay, is that in the staff report that's the specific thing we want the design agreement for? The development agreement to cover?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it couldn't be kind of general random things thrown in the development agreement. Okay,
No.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys introduce yourselves, speak into the microphone, and you'll have 10 minutes.
All right. My name's Sam. I'm from Assist Community Design Center. We're a local nonprofit architecture firm here. And we are the ones that are working on the design for this project, in the remodel of this project. So as mentioned previously, it's an existing hotel. However, the current owner, which is Switchpoint Switchpoint Community Resource Center, has secured about $13.3 million in city and state funding to transition this into a more permanent and long-term housing solution for those transitioning out of homelessness. And the reason why the applicant and also us as an architecture firm and community design center believe this property serves a better purpose as possibly a multifamily property that's deeply affordable is because, as the staff outlined, it's within close proximity to two track stations. Actually, it's within a quarter-mile radius of those track stations. Also, you'll see if you look at the map that's shown or the aerial image, you'll see that the site is actually not even in the flight path, and so when you're out there on the site, we've done a noise study both on the inside and the exterior of the building. but there is no real airport noise on the site, and for that reason, we feel like it should be removed from the airport, from the B zone for the airport influence zone. Actually, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but you notice actually traffic noise a little bit more than you do actually airport noise, and then if you also look closer at a close-up view of the site, you'll see that there already is a significant amount of residential multifamily development happening nearby the site. On the other side of I-215, there's a significant amount. The site outlined in red, and also a couple of other sites that are currently under development are developing multifamily housing. And so we feel that this project would also contribute to a neighborhood feel in the area and help place those transitioning out of homelessness into a good kind of evolving neighborhood of multifamily projects. Jason's going to outline kind of our findings on specifically the noise study and why we decided to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So I'm Jason Wheeler with Assist.
I was going to say, introduce yourself.
Jason Wheeler, also with Assist, again, the architecture firm that's working with Switchpoint Community Resource Center on this project. And, really this became a question of planes versus cars. And just, Chrissy mentioned this briefly in her presentation, but wanted to talk about some of the actual noise impacts that we were seeing. The study was completed on September 8th. And you'll notice if you look at the chart that's on the right-hand side, there were measurements that were taken both inside and outside several of the rooms that are existing there in this building. And so inside room 109, for example, when a plane was landing, there was a decibel level of 43. Outside, it was 60. And then as you keep going down, you can see plane taking off was a decibel level of 58. Inside, it was still at 43. And so they go through these different things, but what generated the most sound immediately outside of the rooms was actually a water truck that was passing by. There's some reconstruction that's happening on 2100 West right now, and so that generated far more noise than the planes did. And then as you get outside of the building, but out closer to I-215, you see those decibel levels pop up into the low 70s. And truly, when you're on the site experientially, you don't notice the noise. Sam mentioned this residential development that's kitty corner across I-215 on the other side that basically is multifamily housing. It has more or less the same sound exposure to I-215 that the site we're looking at has. And you can see just from the courtyard looking up towards I-215, you see a little minivan that's going across. But for the most part, the traffic is obscured both by the concrete barrier and then the height of the landscape. I think the biggest question as we were talking with staff was this question of equity. Really, is it equitable for us to be providing housing for low-income individuals at this location if we wouldn't allow market rate housing there? And my answer to that is that really we are allowing market rate housing there, just across on the other side of the freeway. And this is just an example of the type of equity that Switchpoint Community Resource Center is providing, where they're coming in and providing permanent supportive housing for people who have no housing right now. And in addition to this supportive housing, it's not just a place to stay, but they're providing training opportunities, educational and work opportunities to help people who have experienced long-term homelessness begin to experience long-term housing. And this is just an example of another hotel conversion that they've done within the last year here in Salt Lake City as part of the city's approach and solution to the homeless crisis that we have here. Thank you.
Okay, questions for the applicant?
Is the sound attenuation that's being asked for in the staff report, is that very costly to do, or is that not going to be a big deal?
Yeah, so my understanding in terms of the development agreement that would be there is that it would have to do with a major remodel. Basically, the sound attenuation would be to make sure that we're achieving 30 decibels of sound attenuation in sleeping rooms and 25 decibels in other areas. And then there's also, it has a requirement for an indoor air circulation system. they do cost money to do, but essentially we're planning on providing an addition on the back of this building, and the sound attenuation would primarily apply to that addition rather than to the portion of the building that's existing. So we would incorporate that by means of high STC ratings on the windows, significant insulation in the walls to make sure that that addition is addressing the sound issues.
So, Jason, what's the ultimate intention of the whole site that you have? I mean, you just referred to something that we haven't talked about. It's not a staff report, and we're sort of giving you the go ahead to be straight up TSA zoning, right?
That's right.
And so in essence, you could tear this down. You could build a 8-story building, blah blah blah, right? So.
That's correct. So, and again, SwitchPoint is the current owner, and so if SwitchPoint's not the owner in 6 years or 10 years, whoever the new owner is could do whatever they wanted there,
right.
Which I think is why this development agreement is valuable, to make sure that the sound attenuation is being reached. What the intention of the developer or of SwitchPoint is for the site is to keep the existing building there and provide 94 units of deeply affordable housing. And then as part of their model is that we're not just providing housing, but also providing supportive services. So what the building lacks currently is community space, offices for caseworkers. And so on the back of the building, which is the north side, where there's currently a swimming pool, we would be removing the swimming pool and installing an addition that would include those spaces. We've submitted already to plan review the plans for phase 1, which is just basically the interior improvements to make these units immediately ready. And we're working right now on phase 2, which is that it's an approximately 4,000 square foot addition on the back that's in 2 stories.
Any other questions?
Yeah, maybe a question for staff. Did you mention that you had this was presented to the community and they had any input? I wasn't sure about that.
It was sent to the local community council, but they never sent in a letter. So I did not receive comments from them.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
And there have been no other public comments submitted to you. Okay.
I've got a couple of questions. Is the plan to leave the exterior of the building pretty much the way it appears now?
Yes, that's correct. There's some repair work that needs to be done on the brick and on some of the stucco, and so that would be incorporated into phase 2 of the project. And the addition or modification that is on the north side of the building would not be visible from North Temple. And so for the most part, it's going to look the way that it does now. Yes.
Define transitional and long-term housing for me. Transitional housing traditionally, in my mind, has meant relatively temporary housing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so
and you've described it a couple of times as long-term housing. So
yeah, and maybe that was just a confusion in how we wrote our initial application, but it would be permanent supportive housing. And so I guess in terms of transitional, it's helping people that have been homeless get into permanent supportive housing. So you're transitioning people out of that, but it would not be short-term, 30-day stays where they would then be, going through like a brief rehabilitation and then moving into some other long-term housing. This would be permanent supportive housing. Carol, did I get that right? Yeah.
We'll let you on the public comment part.
Okay.
You're part of the. Okay, then you need to. Yeah. Okay. Well, then you need to come up here and introduce yourself and get a chair, I guess.
I'm Carol Hollowell. I'm the CEO of SwitchPoint. But yeah, just to clarify, we also have a 50-year deed restriction with the city. So we can't sell it in 6 years and then it turn into anything we want. It's a 50-year deed restriction when we accepted the grants for deeply affordable housing. So that's number 1. Number 2, we're focused on the population that is 62 and over that has income but has been priced out of everything. And so they're paying rent of less than $500 because they have Social Security or disability money. And this gives them a nice studio apartment that they can actually afford. So we're not dealing in the transitional housing that you might be thinking of typically. The one that we have currently, we've had people there from the day we opened. And currently right now we have more than 400 people on our waiting list that are above age 62.
And maybe just one more point of clarification. Currently in the airport overlay zone B, the owner of the property can only use the property as a transitional short-term housing. And so, in the interest of helping homeless individuals get established in the community, that's the reason why we're trying to remove that. Because the owner could just continue as a 30-day kind of extended stay type that it's currently at, right? That we could use the property as is, but we're interested in helping homeless or previously homeless individuals establish roots in the community and reestablish themselves.
This is fantastic. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you, and just stay there. There may be questions.
I would just echo my understanding of the staff report speaks of transitional housing, and my understanding of the term transitional housing is exactly what Rick's term was. So it might just be in terms of future projects, kind of clarifying that this is really permanent supportive housing, because I think that I have, I mean, both are great, but I'm even more excited about permanent supportive housing.
Next time I'll proof check, Jason.
And you mentioned that they have income. So are they homeless that have income? Is that the requirement?
We have a huge population right now, and it's nationwide. But right now we've seen a 53% increase in senior homelessness just in the last 18 months here in Salt Lake County. So as they get priced out of places, where do they go? And I just had an 88-year-old today apply. And if that doesn't kill you right now, you have no heart, right? I mean, it's like, this is so wrong to have no place for them to be when they are on a fixed income. So
Gotcha.
that's why they're homeless, right? They've been priced out.
Gotcha, that makes sense. And also, is this, I guess, long-term facility, is it like a supervised thing or just one where they can freely come and go as they please?
All of our facilities are managed 24/7.
Okay.
Yep. So there's staff on site, and we have case managers on site that help them do all kinds of projects. We just had a really nice Veterans Day at our other facility, where we had city council and the mayor come, and chief of police, and lots of music and stuff. So we have, right now, at this site, we already have 47 veterans that are wanting to move in. And so there's a real bonding, that can occur, so.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Could we get a motion? Oh. Since there's so much public here, okay, I will do this. Hang tight here. I will open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any other questions or a motion, please?
I'll make a motion. Unless somebody wants to interrupt me.
Get closer to the microphone.
Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the commission recommend that the city council approve this proposal for a zoning map amendment with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Amy Burrows and a second by Amy Berry. Rick?
Yes.
Amy Berry?
First, I just want to thank staff for bringing up the topic of equitable distribution of where we have this housing. I think it's important, and I'm really pleased that that was something you looked into. But because I think I still have a heart, I'm going to vote yes.
Thank you. Andra?
Yes.
Amy Burrows?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Andreas?
I think what got me was when you said seniors. I think that was the part that really clinched it for me. But yeah, I'll vote yes.
Thank you.
Mike?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So you got 8-0. We're sending a positive recommendation for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seniors have a soft spot.
Okay, that concludes the public hearing portion of the meeting. So now we have a briefing from Thriving in Place. And are you Susan?
I'm not. I'm Angela Price. I'm
Oh,
a
okay.
policy director in community and neighborhoods.
Okay.
Kelsey,
You have me, and then we're going to
Kelsey,
have...
before you share that, David Driscoll, I have him online and he said he was going to go through the presentation. So we're going to let him share it through WebEx rather than, unless.
Okay. If
But
he
he can
prefers to
control it.
share, that'll be easier.
However he wants to do it.
Okay. That's
Okay.
how he told me he wanted to do it.
Okay,
was-
so we're going to have a little, the presenter's going to be on WebEx, so it'll be on the,
Maybe we should do a 5-minute break.
okay, let's take a 5-minute break so they can get all the pieces going here.
Okay.
I think you got to put it up there too. presentation, so I'll let you have it, and I'm restricting you to 20 minutes. So,
Perfect.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Angela Price. I'm a policy director in community and neighborhoods, and I'm one of 2 project managers on Thriving in Place, which is the city's gentrification and anti-displacement mitigation plan. Suze Lundmark is my co-project manager, and she's actually receiving an award this evening from NeighborWorks for her outreach efforts on the west side. So she unfortunately isn't able to join us, but she has a really good excuse. Before I turn the time over to David, we will keep our presentation to 20 minutes. We could probably take up an entire day with all of the work that we've been doing and the proposals that we have. What you guys have before you is what we're so cleverly calling the placemat, which is just an outline of all of the different policy frameworks that we're looking at. And we've been working on this project about a little over a year, almost a year, I guess a year and 3 months. We've done a few briefings to you before. This will be a little bit more of a detailed briefing this evening. We've entered into the second and final phase of the project, which is where we're working on the policy development. And I'm really excited about this project. We've had a really great team with David Driscoll leading us out of Seattle. He's who will be presenting this evening, Urban Displacement Project out of Berkeley. And then we've also been partnered with the University of Utah, both Evis Garcia and Alessandro Rigalon from the City and Metropolitan Planning Division. And then Caitlin Cahill is also supporting us as well. This plan this evening is going to be a briefing for you. We want to reiterate that this is a draft. We're pulling out key things that we think are going to be really important to the work that you guys do as a planning commission. But as you guys can see, there's all kinds of things that we're presenting that we're going to be proposing through Thriving in Place. We pulled out a couple key things because we only have a limited amount of time and they're very detailed. One of them being the housing loss mitigation ordinance, which I know you guys have had probably numerous conversations about over the years. And so we're excited to talk to you a little bit about what we're proposing there and additionally some zoning factors that we're going to be considering in staff reports coming forward. Lastly, I just want to kind of lay out the timeline for you guys. So we're briefing you guys this evening. We're going to be briefing the City Council on December 12th. We have this plan up on the Thriving in Place website right now. We're soliciting information from the public. We have a community working group that will be weighing in on the policies. We have a city stakeholder group that consists of representatives from every department and division within the city. And so we're going to be working on refining this over the coming weeks with refinements after the city council meeting, with a final plan coming together at the end of this year. We'll be bringing this out to a 45-day public engagement period in the first part of 2023 and hoping to get on your schedules for adoption sometime in late February or early March, and then bringing it before the council in mid-March. The reason this plan will be blended into our housing SLC, which is the update of our 5-year housing plan. I know Rudy has presented on that to you guys. So this is going to be a chapter or an appendix to that, and it's really kind of shaping how we are going to be looking at our housing strategies for the next 5 years. It's important to note that this is an anti-displacement plan, so it's not a housing plan, but a lot of this is certainly housing focused. So with that, I don't want to take up any more time because we have a lot of content to get through. If it's okay, we'll have David, I'll turn the time over to David, have him go through his slides, and then if you guys have questions, we'd love to answer anything you guys have for us. Great, thank you so much. Go ahead, David.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. And I think I'm sharing screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to drive the
Can we
slides from
make
here.
it full screen? I have old eyes, and
we don't have this in our staff report.
yeah, thank you.
And I make it full?
That's much better.
Okay, so Angela, you're projecting and doing the slides, correct?
You are,
I am. Okay,
right?
here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So just as Angela said, there's 2 phases of this work. We've finished phase 1, the listening and learning. If you've not had a chance, I encourage you to look at the summary report and information that's on the thrivinginplaceslc.org website. That's where we're posting up everything, and all the material I'm walking through tonight is also up on the website, along with a feedback form. And folks who are watching from the public in particular, encourage you to go there, look at the information and give us your thoughts and feedback. We have this graphic which describes the overall framework. In anti-displacement work, we talk a lot about the 3 Ps. So protecting tenants from displacement, preserving affordable housing that we have, and producing more housing overall and affordable housing in particular. Our phase 1 work definitely underscored that you have a lack of housing to meet the high demand that exists and is continuing in Salt Lake. And every time rents go up, people are displaced. And some of them are able to find places nearby, but a lot of people end up either leaving the area or being on the street, doubling up. There's a lot of invisible homelessness. So anyway, those are the 3 Ps that are at the core of the displacement strategy. And those are embedded within 3 other areas that sort of support all 3 of those. So looking at ways we can expand funding, that's going to be something we're going to be bringing forward to the council. Some possibilities for increasing investment. Partnering is a really key concept, partnering with the community, particularly the impacted communities that are most at risk, as well as with other agencies and private entities that help to do all the things that we need to do to counter displacement pressures. And then doing advocacy work at the state level to help change the regulatory framework to create other opportunities for us. I'm not going to walk through all this. This is the placemat you have in front of you. I just wanted to show it just to underscore all the different parts of the strategy, the framework. We're not going to talk about them all tonight. Folks who are watching, you can go online onto the website and download the placemat. You can download placemats for all your family members for Thanksgiving. And we're going to focus in particular on things that help to address the displacement impacts from development. So lack of housing development is the overall driver. So I want to make sure that we understand these actions within the context of being pro-housing. It's extremely important that we do things to expand the housing supply and specifically expand affordable housing. But when displacement happens, new development impacts existing housing, sometimes very directly in terms of demolition and sometimes indirectly in terms of impacting adjacent properties or neighborhoods. So I'm going to talk about 3 sort of tiers, levels of action. One is integrating anti-displacement strategies in your policy framework. So as you see every time you see a development come before you, development proposals are weighed against your adopted policies. So being really explicit about your anti-displacement strategies and goals so that those can be referenced when you're doing decision-making for changes in land use and development approvals. Looking at ways to incentivize affordable housing. You're working on this right now. We'll talk a little bit about that, but not much. And then also looking at ways to invest in tenant supports, including relocation assistance for those who are displaced by new development. And together, these are intended to replace the Housing Loss Mitigation Ordinance, which has an awesome name and very good intent, but isn't really working in terms of mitigating that loss of the impact on the loss of units, and specifically affordable housing units. So in terms of that first tier, our action 2A speaks to looking at displacement impacts when you're doing master planning, when you're doing zoning agreements, zoning amendments, and when you're doing development agreements. So it's to ensure that you've got that policy framework and looking broadly at not just affordable housing outcomes, but also looking at other things when you're doing master plans, resources that exist in the community that help communities stay in place and thrive, which housing's at the core, but there's also, the local serving commercial businesses that sometimes get displaced from new development that we also want to support to help communities stay in place and thrive. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I know we're on the clock. So the master plans establish the long-term vision, and then what's particularly important within the context of Utah, because we can't make requirements very easily on new development, is setting up a framework for voluntary agreements where we're going to talk about this in the next few slides, giving additional development capacity or doing investment through RDA or other sources, and in return asking for or requiring, as part of a voluntary agreement, contributions to affordability. We're going to want to integrate displacement factors and mitigation measures in your code so that those are explicit and we know what it is we're looking at, and how we're going to evaluate that when we have development proposals. And also another part of the framework speaks to the need for tracking displacement indicators. So we know where displacement pressures are happening. We know that from the work we just did, but we want to know it going forward so that if you need to adjust the policy basis, you can do that in a more real-time way. So we would be looking to, in terms of the specific action steps, formalizing displacement analysis and mitigation in master plan processes, incorporating some language in specific parts of the code, and adding displacement factors. I'm just going to give a few, like what the heck do you mean by displacement factors? So we'd be looking at, if we're looking at doing a master plan, what's the percentage of renter households in that area, particularly lower income renter households are going to be most susceptible to displacement, looking at people of color who tend to be more proportionally represented in lower income renter households, and what's the likely impact of development decisions we're making, and what can we do and to head off those displacement pressures in the planning process and then in the subsequent decisions that come out of the process. We're looking at affordable housing. So there's the people and then there's the housing, the units. So expiring deed restrictions, older housing that is naturally occurring, affordable housing, a little bit definition on another slide. And then things that some of the demand drivers, private investment, public investment, that are potentially going to change demand in an area that we want to then make sure. One of the parts of the plan talks about coordinating city investment. So if you're going to make an investment in transit, you're also making investments in affordable housing in the areas around where the transit investment's happening, and being proactive about that. So mitigation measures are doing things like preserving or requiring new affordable housing in development areas, providing relocation assistance and rental assistance to impacted renters, and then other things like investing in cultural institutions that help to keep communities in place over time. I know I'm flying through this, but there's a lot to get through. As Angela said, we could.
Excuse me, David, is this available somewhere? Because this is not on the placemat. The things that you're presenting to us are not on the placemat, and that's all we got in our packet was the placemat. We didn't get any narrative that suggests any of this, and it's a lot to take in and a lot to memorize and a lot to think about. And if it's available somewhere or online or something, I mean, it's a lot.
Yep, and it's very much a draft, to underscore what Angela said. So it's been an evolution. We can send this to you in an email, a link to this, as well as a file. And definitely tonight is sort of an overview, and looking for feedback. We can come back at another meeting if that's helpful, or however that works best for you guys.
It's very difficult to give you feedback on something that we can't really see it very well. It's on the screen, and the screen is not that available, and it's just not it's going to be very hard to give feedback on something that, I mean, these have incredible implications for planning. You're talking about factoring in the affordability of rents in a neighborhood, factoring in, the racial component of a neighborhood, et cetera, and that's a lot to put into the kinds of considerations that we have when we make these decisions around zoning amendments and so forth.
If I may, it's on the link on that memo that was posted. So if you go to the thrivinginplaceslc.org/action.
We could if we can get online.
Oh, okay. Okay, you don't have a Wi-Fi connection this
None
evening?
of us can get Wi-Fi. No, we never can.
Okay, okay. Okay, sorry.
Several weeks we've had this issue.
Okay.
Commissioners, I'd be happy to put the presentation in your Dropbox. I didn't realize you still weren't connected to the internet.
Still not connected.
If that was a problem,
Are any of you connected to
should
the internet? No.
bring that to my attention.
Yeah.
Amy, didn't you get connected?
I've never been able
No.
to get on the internet.
Okay.
I'm sorry to, I don't mean to sound negative or anything, but this is a huge stuff here. And if you actually want, us to have anything about it, I mean, all we got in our packet was the placemat. And, it's not at all the kind of detail that you're talking about here, which has, as you clearly understand, very important implications for planning and master planning and zoning amendments and so forth, as you obviously are suggesting here. So, it's hard to talk about that.
Yes, and I apologize about the Wi-Fi issue. I was not aware. We can try to work with IMS on the Wi-Fi connection in this room. The staff report was posted last week with that link, and so there is a summary within that page that provides this framework. And then, like Aubrey said, we can post this presentation in your Dropbox as well.
Is the link in the letter?
The link is within that memo that was posted in the Dropbox.
But not in the staff report.
It's in the staff report, yes.
I'm still having a hard time figuring out where, even on the Thriving in Place, I can see this presentation.
It's not the same.
It's not on the website now.
No, it's
This level of detail is not.
Okay, because I guess, I mean, I had the same reaction as Brenda is when I saw this in the staff report. I did look at the website. I'm lacking a lot of specific policies here, and so to see all the policies which are closer to specific policy recommendations, it'd be nice to be able to review these in advance, and then we can provide a little bit better quality feedback.
So do you want me, I can continue giving a verbal overview of it, and then we can come back another time? What's your preference? We're definitely interested in your feedback and want to make sure you have the time to digest it.
I think an overview of the specific policy suggestions is good, but we're going to probably want to have it to review with time, because I've been frantically writing as you go, and it is a lot to do, but I think a nice overview of what those policy implications are for us would be good to get tonight, but knowing that we're going to want to be able to digest it a little bit further so that we can provide some substantive comments. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to schedule an additional time for you.
Yeah, we're happy to come back, and we know this is a lot. We weren't expecting you guys to be able to give us, really detailed comments tonight. We wanted to put this out there, let you guys digest it. We're happy to come back as many times as we need to before adoption to make you guys feel comfortable. As you can see, there's a ton of stuff on here, and we're pulling out 3 things for you. So are we?
Yeah. How about we
And I'll
let
explore-
Mr. Driscoll go ahead with his presentation and make whatever notes you want to, Brenda, and we'll have another opportunity to interact with them. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay. So I mean, so the highest level is making sure that we're factoring in anti-displacement measures when we're doing master plans. So you have a policy basis for what comes next, which is amendments to zoning and development agreements. So making sure that we're saying that we're going to develop criteria, and we're getting examples of criteria, but we're not proposing that you're going to adopt those criteria anytime in the next weeks, but in the coming months as part of the implementation of the plan. And we just highlight some of the considerations and challenges. How do you make that as objective as possible? And have consistency in how it gets applied, and then enforcing implementation of agreements, policies and agreements that are made. That's one of the things that we need to, as we do put the plan in place, essentially we're going to be putting in place as an action plan of things to get to work on. And we're going to have to look at everything that's on that sheet, which is a lot. It's not going to all be able to happen at once. What's the most important thing to happen soon? What's the right sequence? And making sure that we have the resources dedicated to those tasks to get it done, not just in terms of putting stuff in place, but then managing over time. So again, this is very much draft and it's for discussion. We expect it to evolve before there's a final in front of you next year. So one of the things at the core of this sort of rethinking of the housing loss mitigation is how do we capture the value from zoning changes to support our affordability goals. That's essentially what you're doing in the affordable housing incentives program policy that you're working on. We want to look at that and sort of how do we factor in if there's units that are on a site, affordable units on a site, does that change any way in which we think about and apply those affordable housing incentives? But it's essentially the same idea of an incentive-based approach to mitigating the loss of affordable housing or replacing that through either replacement or through an in lieu fee payment or preservation on the site. So I think you're pretty familiar with the work that you're doing in this area, but this will be intersecting with that, so I'm not going to go into that a lot. One thing I did want to call out that other forms of development besides residential development can contribute, and in my humble opinion, should contribute to your affordable housing goals. It would require some changes in state law, but when you have like a 500, person commercial development that's coming in and creating new employment, that creates affordable housing need, and there's a lot of ways in which we can get contributions towards affordable housing if we create some enabling law to support that. So it's something that is more down the road, but looking at opportunities even for volunteer agreements for affordable housing contributions of non-residential development. And then I'm going to just complete these slides. So this is the 1A, replace the housing loss mitigation ordinance. It very much intersects and overlaps with those previous two I just walked through. The current housing loss mitigation ordinance really looks just at units that are lost. It doesn't even specifically look at affordable units. It's just concerned whether there's enough housing unit that's impacted. We're interested in focusing in particular on affordable housing, so that if an affordable housing unit is lost, it gets replaced, mitigated with another affordable housing unit, not just we lose an older affordable unit and it gets replaced by a current market rate unit that might be out of the price range of the folks who've been impacted. And then the other piece that's not in your housing loss mitigation ordinance is the impact on tenants. And I'm going to talk first about the unit piece. We just looked at the scale of impact. So since January of 2021, you've had pre-demolition permit applications filled out for 130 sites, and on those 130 sites, there were 297 units. We do not have the data on whether those units were actually then demolished. We know in some cases that they were not. In particular, the largest one, 61 units, the decision was made not to demolish the units, even though they showed up in the permit application. But I think the main thing here is I want to underscore, if we fix the housing loss mitigation, we mitigate the loss of these units, it's not going to solve your problem overall, which is rising rents, which is eroding affordability in many, many, many more units than these 300 units that are in these applications the last 3 years. That's not to say these aren't important. The folks who live in those units who are impacted, this disrupts their life in very significant ways. And we want to do what we can, both to mitigate the loss of the unit and to support those who are impacted through relocation. So this is essentially your affordable housing incentives program that would kick in order to mitigate the loss of those units when there's a development proposal on a property where there's an existing unit. So we would incentivize preservation or replacement. There's some work that we'd have to do to define income requirements and equivalency standards for on-site affordability. So what's the loss of an affordable unit, and then what's the replacement that is roughly equal. And I am an advocate for providing an in lieu fee option. Use can oftentimes get a lot more achieved using fee payments if they're structured at the right level and developing units on another site than necessarily getting them on site. And one of the big advantages is that you can then have affordable units that are owned and operated by a mission-driven organization, a nonprofit that is committed to the long-term affordability of those units rather than something with a 20 or 30-year deed restriction, and then it becomes market rate. So a lot of work to finesse the right level of incentive to make this something that people want to do, because we cannot require it under state law. What's the right level of affordability requirement to build into it, and what are the appropriate in lieu fee levels? What's the enforcement mechanism, and how much flexibility do you provide? Which there is an attractiveness to having flexibility, but you also want to have predictability. You're not just making it up on the fly every time there's a project before you. And then lastly, I'll just talk about the tenant side of it. So if we were to say 300 renter households were potentially impacted by demolition, which we know is an overcount over the last 2 years, and it's a small percentage of your renter households. If we were to say we were going to offer $3,000 to $4,000 of relocation assistance to those, that comes to about $600,000 a year. So obviously it'd be less than that in offering relocation assistance. And less than that in terms of a city investment if there was a developer contribution through voluntary agreements. So the trick here is identifying and being able to proactively identify and work with tenants who are facing displacement from new development. We're looking at ways to do that through the pre-demolition application, so we have better information. And then linking that with existing programs that you already have some programs that provide assistance on relocation when there's city money involved, but this would be looking more broadly when there's displacement of any type resulting from new development. So we look at revising the pre-demo application form, modifying the current policy you have related to relocation assistance, and then in addition to helping with relocation, making sure those folks are aware of, and if they're eligible for, have access to rental assistance for the period of time that they might be displaced. And then lastly, what's called in many communities a community preference policy. So this relates to when you create a deed restricted unit, so only people who are income qualified can then move into those units, that folks who either lived on that site or in the neighborhood that were displaced have a priority in terms of moving into those units that are created. Number of challenges related to making this a reality. It takes resources to manage it over time. You need a good business process, obviously a preference for building on an existing process rather than creating something from scratch. And then there's the issue of allowing for relocation funds to be used if someone's leaving a neighborhood in Salt Lake and going to an adjacent community, making sure that we have flexibility in the funds to support that. And then last, we have some things in the strategy related to changes to the Good Landlord training program, and how we collect rent data through some mechanisms that are voluntary, but we think that there's a path to getting better rent data through those. And that's the whirlwind of that part of the strategy.
Okay, does anyone have questions at this point?
I do.
Okay.
They're going to be random because as I was writing down as we went. So one of the first feedback comments, whatever we want to call this tonight, that I had was the focus on updating master plans to incorporate these strategies. Our master plans, there's numerous ones. Some of them are really old, and they don't get updated frequently. So I think that's a bad strategy, and I'm wondering if there is another way to tackle it in some form of, because of my limited understanding of all things urban planning, but somewhat like the overlay zones where it can just exist citywide and not specific to master plans, just because I don't think we'll see them incorporated in all the master plans. for the foreseeable decades ahead. The other question I had, and I don't know if we do this, but in some zones we have like point systems. So like in TSA zones, if you incorporate XYZ, you get so many points, and if you score above a certain threshold, you don't have to go before the Planning Commission. Is affordable housing currently one of those point systems? I don't know if Kelsey or Amy can.
Can you ask that question again?
Yeah, so in TSA zones, we have the points, where if you incorporate these things, you get extra points. Is the incorporation of affordable housing included in that point system currently?
I believe so, yes, in
It
the
is?
TSA district. I can pull that up. It is an objective for the plan development. So to opt into a plan development, you can provide a certain percentage of AMI. I think the minimum is 80% to opt into that process, but let me pull up the TSA district. I believe that is a point.
Yeah, I don't need the specifics on it. I just wanted to know if it was a current one, because I think that might be a worthwhile strategy to think about in terms of not incorporating it into every master plan, because that won't happen for a long time.
And Commissioner Berry, just on another note, as far as incentives, while you're bringing up the TSA point system, the affordable housing incentives will be similar to that. So they're going to be incentive based, right?
Oh, good, because that's one of my other questions I wrote down here was somewhere around here. Oh, yeah. Is because there seems to be so much similarities to this Thrive in Place section of displacement and whatnot. Are you guys overlapping then the affordable housing incentive that you're working on now, so that they work together nicely?
Yes. Yeah. Do you want me to answer these, or do you want to keep going?
Jump in.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, your point on the master plans is certainly something we've considered, and we aren't going to go back and amend the master plans. We're saying master plans going forward would have these factors included in them. And then our housing SLC, which is going to be our 5-year housing plan, will have these displacement factors in them as well. So when you guys get your staff reports from the planners, they always outline, if the project is congruent with the master plan, housing SLC, the various plans that they pull. So these displacement factors will be in housing SLC, and then any master plans going forward, we would, be looking at displacement factors as well. So point well taken on that. We know we have a lot of really old, outdated master plans that wouldn't, or not outdated, but old master plans that we wouldn't go and amend those. And then we are working closely with the planning division on the affordable housing incentives. I'm actually on the mayor's working group for that as a policy representative. And we've been working really closely with the planning division on looking at what our incentive factors could be and overlaying them and tying them to the work that you guys are doing there, in addition to considering other factors as well. David, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
Nope, that's great.
Okay, so moving on, I don't know if we think having it just in housing SLC is enough. I don't know the answer to that, but putting in here that we would be updating master plans, I mean, I probably won't see that on my tenure here, and who knows when the next one will be updated. So I don't know that that's a great goal to be listing out that will help us. Because when I'm thinking about what are the tools we have, when we have very little tools regarding this. So having it in housing SLC is like one part. I don't know if having it also in master plans is then necessary, or if it makes it more important. I don't know.
Well, the piece on that too that's important to note is because we have state preemption on inclusionary zoning, if we have a project that comes before the Planning Commission that meets the existing zoning and meets the master plan, it won't trigger housing loss mitigation, because we can't require incentive. We can't require them to pay a fee or do anything. So the master plan piece, 100% agree with you, and we'll think through that a little bit more closely with the planning division. But the focus on that was that we want to be able to have opportunities for if we're losing housing units, for us to, you as a planning commission and the city council, to be able to get a public benefit out of the loss of those housing units, whether it's through the creation of more affordable housing or in lieu fee or whatever that would look like. And so that's why there was a focus there on the master plan. But I certainly hear your
I think it should be in the master plans. I just don't want to wait for 30 years for it to get into the master plans.
I agree.
So maybe there is a different strategy in which to amend the master plans en masse. I don't know. But if we think about doing that in a way that is just going to naturally filter as we update them, I might be dead before it happens. So
Barry,
you might want to just rethink that strategy.
I can just jump in and talk a little bit about the master plan objective. The housing plan, which is updated every 5 years, will address these goals. And then as we identify some priorities that maybe we didn't achieve, or identify new priorities in the next 5 years and then subsequent 5 years, we're going to include those in updated master plans as those
Well, I guess my
happen.
question is, having it in Housing Salt Lake, is that sufficient enough to give us the tools we're talking about?
Absolutely. It is an adopted citywide housing plan.
Okay. So moving on to the mitigation part. Right now we have that menu of choices that you can do, and it sounds like you kind of want to keep that, like in lieu of payments, or in lieu of fee, et cetera. But we've found that that doesn't necessarily work with what we have now. So why are we keeping that?
Yeah. Well, so again, kind of going back to what I was just saying on the master plan. So we have some state policies that have passed over the past couple of years that make our existing housing loss mitigation ordinance challenging. And the reason that right now the fee doesn't work, there's a lot of reasons, but the way the formula is structured right now in our current ordinance, the fee usually negates a negative number. And it wasn't until just recently that we started seeing positive numbers there on a few projects that have been before you recently. What we're proposing here is a little bit different in the sense that, again, because we had an inclusionary zoning policy pass in HB 303 this year, where we can only require an incentive-based approach for a rezone or a master plan amendment. The thought there is that we could, a developer, if we're giving them additional density and height, for example, and they're not congruent with the existing master plan, so they're asking for a master plan amendment and a zoning amendment, that we could consider, they could have a toolbox of things that they could choose from, right? So it could be that they pay an in lieu fee. It could be that they pay into a tenant displacement program. We would have a menu of things that they could choose from. In addition to, you guys would have a menu of tools that you could request as an incentive for them.
So I guess, the next briefing, I'd really like to understand why that's different than what we have. Like, why is that going to work versus what we have that's not working when they sound very similar? So maybe expand on that for me. And then I'm wondering, is the so we talked about mitigation for displacement. So if we have a developer who wants a project and there's 4 dilapidated houses and they're going to tear them down and put this multifamily project up or whatever their project is the displacement of those 4 houses only if they're occupied? That we would require them to be mitigated because they may be vacant, but they could be affordable if the owner had been renting them. Because are we going to then reward people who have already evicted somebody, and then a year later come back to us with a project and they just say, well, the house is empty. So I'm wondering about that.
So I can speak to briefly if the development that's being proposed is what they can do under their existing zoning, there's nothing we can ask them to do to mitigate the
Can you
loss
speak
of
up on David? You went too quiet. I can't hear you.
If the development that's being proposed is what's allowed under the zoning that they have today and consistent with the master plan, there's nothing we can do to require them to mitigate any loss of those units. We can only do it through an incentives program.
Yes, I
So-
understand that.
So we were-
My question was, and then you can further elaborate this on the future, is, and this happens, right? Is that we'll have a developer who, well, you know, these projects take them years to do, and they may have kicked everybody out. So they have a collection of empty residences, and their point is they come to us and say, well, these are dilapidated. It would cost too much money to rehabilitate them. They're empty. Nobody can live in them. That may or may not be true, but are we rewarding that strategy in not requiring mitigation if they're going to tear those down and put in something else? And that's my question, because
Right.
we've seen that play out. It's not something I'm making up, like maybe that could happen.
Yeah, it happens all the time, and sometimes not but in terms of any evil intent. It's just that someone's lease is up. I know I'm going to be redeveloping this. I'm not going to renew your lease.
That is true. That is a good point. That is true.
And other places in the country, they sometimes will require like 5 years of data on occupancy of a unit.
So it's something to
but
consider.
I'm not saying that that's what's going to come out the other side.
Yeah, that's
here
a
in
good
Salt Lake.
point. I think that's something to consider, to elaborate on in a future briefing of what is that displacement, you know, trying to preserve existing housing. What's the criteria for that, right? And maybe it is a 5-year rental history or a look back. But that would be nice to elaborate on. And then finally, and then I'll be quiet, is the plan for these preserving the existing units also going to be put in somehow so that if a project is over the counter, it's meeting existing zoning, it's not going to come before us. And David talked about demo permits. Is this going to be something that the planning reviewer, who's just going to be doing the permit and doesn't necessarily always know all these processes, will this be something that they can then use as a tool before issuing permits to demo existing building or existing houses as we try to preserve what's in place? Are we giving them the tools as well as us?
Yeah, the intention right now, one of the challenges, there are many challenges with the existing housing loss mitigation ordinance, but one of the main challenges is that it lives in a completely different chapter. So it's 1897, it doesn't live in 21, which is your zoning chapter that the planners review. And so what we were looking at when we were trying to solve this, the issues with housing loss mitigation, is how we can give the planners the tools to analyze if there's going to be displacement that happens, but then also to be able to give the planning commission and the city council the tools that you guys need to understand if displacement's happening, and also how you can, again, get that public benefit out of it. So I think that we're hopeful that having these moved into 21A, where, and we're still working through where in code all of this is going to live and what those code rewrites are going to look like. But the intention really is to have these displacement factors as an analysis in a staff report. If that, I don't know if that answers your question.
As far as the by right development, be similar to today, it's quite difficult to mitigate any displacement that occurs with the by right development. I think with some of the proposed policies and intended objectives that David and Angela have gone over would be more of how can the city or partners help to mitigate some of that displacement in the future.
I guess I'm just hoping that this actually gives us tools to work with and not just be like, yeah, we hope this works. We don't know.
There's too much on the line for us not to give you tools.
So, all right, thank you.
But I'm concerned that, you know, like the thing we're working on, the I can't remember the name of it now, the incentives that we're working on. These are kind of unproven strategies, and I'm wondering what kind of proof we have that any of this works anywhere, really. I mean, incentivizing, I know that certain things work to keep people from being displaced, like rent control, which is like out of the question in Utah, of course. But do we know of, do we have a good sense that any of these things which you're proposing will be significant enough to really make a difference? Do we have the research that does that? And do you have, I'm sure there is research around this because people research this stuff, but and are we applying that research in a way that's appropriate for Utah? Like you can't do, certain things in Utah because of the way the political system runs and because that's the way people live and have expectations here about property rights and so forth. So there's many, many, many things which might work, which are pretty draconian and won't work in Utah. So I'm concerned that we're tailoring a strategy that both works and has some proven say, okay, we normally would have this kind of displacement, but now we have much less because we've instituted these strategies, or we're just kind of hoping that they'll work.
I guess I'd echo that. Like the inclusionary zoning, the evidence is that it actually decreased supplies in the places that it has been implemented. Like we have evidence on this stuff. It's bad. The empirical evidence is really bad on inclusionary zoning, as is the theory. I appreciate all the effort on this. Negotiating with the state, I think, is tricky. I actually think our mayor does an outstanding job of making sure we get as many resources as we can from the state to support the city. She, I think, has limited political capital, and I don't know that trying to get rid of rent control laws is the best way we can use that political capital. We don't need the state to change any code at all to just get rid of single-family zoning. Other municipalities are doing this. Other jurisdictions are doing this. The state would not give us pushback on that. So I'd like us to focus on stuff where we're not going to be wasting political capital with the state. The other thing, I love the idea of supporting tenants. We have a lot of assets. We're sitting on $1 billion worth of golf course land. I don't know, can we identify some of those assets that we could use to put into a trust fund to support these displaced tenants? Because I do agree the cash payments to help them resettle and hopefully try to get them to new housing that would be affordable. I'd really like I'd like to see that, but I'd like to actually see us identify assets and say, do we care more about letting people exhaust our water so they can golf on a public course as opposed to a private course, or do we care more about displaced tenants? And I think that we need to have a serious conversation about who we care about. In lieu versus making if we are going to do density bonuses, the in lieu fees. I mean, I saw this happen in Chapel Hill, and the issue is they just sat there in a fund because the city didn't have the capacity to build housing. Like unless we have cities are not generally in the business of being developers. And so I don't know that in lieu is going to work better than density bonuses. But I would like to see tenants supported, and I do understand how difficult this is for them. I'd just like us to put some actual cash behind this.
I remember when we were talking about the hardware project, the hardware building, and we were looking at their TSA points thing. And one of the ways they could have gotten points was to do affordable housing, and it's just never on the table for them. They're like, well, we could put in another coffee shop, which would be better than affordable housing. And I just think if there are so many choices, or if the planning commission or whatever is really generous with exceptions and stuff like that, and points for other things, then affordable housing is the one that's never considered. It's never going to be the one that they choose. So I saw that on that one project, and maybe I think it could happen a lot.
Well, just to the previous 2 points, I mean, the level of incentive needs to be an incentive. Like that's the art of developing these policies. It has to actually be high enough that it's an incentive for people to actually take advantage of it.
So you've gotten a little feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
And we appreciate you taking the time to come and share with us. And we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time tonight. Aubrey will share the deck with you. If there are other policy areas on here that you want us to pull out and present on specifically, let us know. We, like I said, just pulled a few key ones that we knew would be integral to the work that you guys do as a planning commission, but happy to get granular on any of the other policies that are on the placemat as well.
You know, I appreciate what you're doing, and I do like an infographic, but I also like a serious report that has all of the data and all of the background and all of the you know, the strategies that you're talking about in more detail. So I know that lots of people don't like that, and they just want the, you know, the quick and dirty. But I think if we're really talking about policies for the city, that we, you know, if that's available, that would be great.
We'll be putting together a detailed report. We haven't gotten to that part yet because we're still soliciting feedback and refining, but the plan that will be adopted will definitely be a detailed report on each one of these. So great. Thank you so much.
I have a question that's kind of along those lines. This is both a policy discussion and a program discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So on things such as creating a one-stop shop resource to help prevent evictions and provide easy access, where is that going to be housed in the city? And what kind of an annual budget are you looking at to provide this kind of programmatic?
Yeah, so our Housing Stability Division actually does a lot of tenant resource programs already. So it's really just, it'll be an expansion on that. And of course, part of our intention of why, I mean, our housing plan expires, but the reason that we have put the time frame together that we have is so that we can understand from the Planning Commission and City Council what policies and programs here are supported, and then have budget requests tied to them. So specifically for 1B, we envision that would probably be both within the Housing Stability Division and then also within business licensing. They have a landlord-tenant initiative, which is also called the Good Landlord Program. And right now, the tenant piece is lacking quite a bit. And so we certainly, some of these initiatives would take funding both from a programmatic standpoint, but also from a staffing standpoint. So those are all things that we're analyzing, in addition to looking at where we have city code changes, where we have state code barriers. And I actually do legislative work for the city. And so also looking at opportunities where we do want to expend political capital and where we don't.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We will adjourn this meeting of the Planning Commission.